Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this fireside chat on fostering inclusivity in the workplace, a crucial topic in today's world. We have a fantastic session planned for you today featuring experts in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion who will be bringing a unique perspective to the discussion. Let's give everyone one more minute to settle in before we get started. Welcome, everybody, to this fireside chat on fostering inclusivity in the workplace. Today's session is brought to you by Intellect. We are APAC's most comprehensive mental health platform, offering end-to-end mental health care. We provide a range of resources to support employees, from self-care content to working with coaches, working with counselors or therapists. And we understand that mental health is experienced on a spectrum, and we're here to offer support, guidance, and growth across the whole spectrum. Intellect also onboards and screens a number of providers across different countries and across different markets as LGBTQIA+, sexual orientation and gender affirming, as well as neurodiverse affirming coaching and therapy techniques. And this will also soon be readily available as a filter on your end, so you can find your preferred coach, counselor, or therapist. The platform is available on both mobile and desktop, making it accessible to everyone. So no matter where you are, we've got your mental health covered. Today, our focus is on diversity, equity, and inclusion, commonly referred to as DEI. It's not just a buzzword, it's an essential aspect of creating a psychologically safe workplace for all of us. Before we dive in, let me quickly introduce myself. I'll be your moderator for today's session. My name is Linda. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. As someone who is passionate about promoting diversity and inclusion, I am happy to see a large number of people joining today, and I hope that these conversations can really create a more positive change in our workplaces and in our communities as well. But let's get to the exciting part, our wonderful panelists. Our first panelist is Shani, the DEI lead from Mediabrands APAC. With extensive experience in implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, Shani brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion. Welcome today, Shani.
Morning, Linda, and good afternoon to anybody else who's in a different time zone. It is lovely to be here, and it's really exciting to see how many people are joining in. My background is, well, I currently work in the media and ed technology space, but I've had work in lots of other industries, and I'm looking forward really today to the audience questions.
Thank you so much. Very exciting. And it's a pleasure to have you here as well. Our second panelist for today is Miguel, an experienced coach who has lived and worked in various countries, offering a unique perspective on DEI. Welcome, Miguel.
Thank you, Linda. I'm happy to be here today. I'm joining you guys from Tokyo, Japan. It's here almost 12:05 p.m. Well, myself, being in different countries, I am an entrepreneur, I am an agile trainer, an agile coach. I am ICF certified coach too. And today, very happy to be discussing about DEI, and hopefully it will be very interactive with all of you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your introductions. Throughout our discussion, we will explore the relationship between diversity, equity, and inclusion and mental health. But before we begin, let's take a moment to highlight what exactly you can take away from today's session. We want to first understand, or we want to delve into that connection between DEI and mental health, recognizing how inclusive practices positively impact our overall well-being. We'll explore effective strategies and insights on how coaching can help overcome barriers to DEI, discover how coaching can be a valuable tool in promoting inclusivity within organizations, and of course, we will discuss and evaluate the effectiveness of DEI practices, examining different approaches and identifying key indicators to measure progress and success. By the end of today's session, we aim to provide you with valuable knowledge, practical tips, and some thought-provoking insights that you can apply to your own workplace or any kind of professional endeavors that you have planned. We have 5 minutes dedicated at the end for a Q&A section. So please feel free to leave your questions in the Zoom Q&A section right now or throughout our panel. And our panelists and I will do our best to address them or address as many as we can at the end of the session. So remember, this session is designed to be interactive and your questions will play a vital role in shaping the conversation. So please don't hesitate, share your thoughts, share your insights, and any questions you might have. Additionally, I want to ensure that today's session is also being recorded. So for those of you who might miss a part or you want to share this with a colleague or share it with a friend, we'll be able to look up the recording at a later point in time. You can review any kind of valuable insights or share them with anybody you'd like. Now, let's move on to our interactive polls. I really want to kickstart our discussion, not necessarily with our panelists, but with our audience today. So I would like each and every one of you to go ahead and either take your phone, scan the QR code that you see on the screen here, or alternatively, you can click the link that my colleague just put in the chat. This should open an anonymous poll for you. You don't have to add your name if you don't want to. And we have a first question already set up. I would like you to use one word to describe your organization's culture. So I'll give you a few seconds to set this up. Click the link in the Zoom chat. Ooh, we've got diverse. What a strong start. Very exciting. Fair, open, respectful. The bigger a word gets, the more people have said the same word. So we're seeing open and inclusive being quite prominent here. We have vibrant, encouraging, we also have passive, family. I'm having a hard time keeping track. So many answers coming in. Very good. Thank you so much, everybody. We have transparent, aggressive, demanding, harmonious. But it really seems like the big ones seem to be inclusive, open, and diverse. We also have kind, integrity. We also have toxic, demanding. Oh, I might be repeating a few of them. Integrity, rooted, colorful. These are amazing answers coming in. Accepting. We have engaging, autonomous, growth, Not so inclusive? Well, you're in the right webinar today. Welcome. Agile, evolving. Wow, these are amazing words. Thank you so much for giving us a first little glimpse into your organization's culture. Glad to see that inclusive really seems to be the big word here. And there's lots of other interesting facets as well to our organization's cultures. Thank you so much for your input. Please keep these polls open. We're going to keep coming back. We want to make sure that we get a little bit more input from the audience as well. Now, let's dive into our first questions. Shini, I'd love to hear from you. As a DEI lead, you have extensive experience in implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And could you share with us what DEI really encompasses and why it's important to have a strong DEI culture and good policies?
Lovely question to get us started with. I think the first step is just explaining what the D, the E, and the I stand for. And with D, diversity, I think it's really important to remember there's a lot of different types of people in the world, different races, different genders, sexual orientations, people who are neurodiverse, people with mental health issues and disabilities, and that list just keeps going on and on and on. A truly diverse workplace, and I think some of you have been noticing your workplaces are diverse, a truly diverse workplace will include all of these people. But having just different people isn't enough. In fact, differences can be a little scary because differences often also lead to misunderstanding if it's not managed well. So very often, as much as we invite and say we want different people in our workplace, we invite them in and then we ask them to fit in, to be like everybody else, to sort of don't be the nail that stands out too much in order to get ahead. So this is where the I, the last piece, the inclusion comes in. It is when people really, what we want is people to bring their differences to the table, but that's not going to happen until they feel like they belong in our workplaces, no matter their background. So that's the diversity and the inclusion. To be really fair, if the world was really, really a fair place, our workplaces and leadership team will be automatically diverse and people won't feel the need to hide their differences. But we are just not there yet, and we need to acknowledge that even the best workplaces still have room to grow. So why there's this difference is that there's lots of complex histories, legal and social systems, which end up having people with differences starting at unequal starting points. The E part of it, the equity, is about recognizing that we have unequal starting points and different people have different needs. So we need to have our workplaces meet the different needs of these people. So that's the DEI in simple form.
Amazing. Thank you so much for walking us through that. That was really, really helpful to get us started on. And next, Miguel, I'd love to hear from you as a coach. What would you say is that link between DEI and mental health?
Oh, yes, that's an important question too. Then let me use a case, a real case with one of my clients in the United States. I wouldn't disclose names, of course, dealing with Latino workers. Well, these Latino workers reported that they were kind of facing discriminatory type of behaviors from their counterparts in the same company. And that was evident in the different types of manifestations, not only at work in terms of performance, but also at the physical level and mental level and emotional level. So with coaching, then we kind of address those issues, asking for, first of all, learn about the culture of the company, and then see if the values of the company were aligned with the values of the workers. They were Latinos, many of them born in the United States, they were Americans, but the different type of interactions from their counterparts made them feel that they were kind of discriminated. And obviously they create a lot of distress, and that manifested in this type of anxiety, fear, right? And depression in many cases. And this sense of less worth, if you will, self-worth. And then they felt like they were not enough to really work at the company. And they were losing this sense of self-efficacy, self-fulfillment, and self-actualization. It is only through coaching that we were able to identify those hidden emotional factors that once a parent with skills learned through different type of effective communication skills, like nonviolent communication, assertiveness, and inclusive conversations, techniques, and the skills, we were able more or less to address this issue, which obviously would take really time to correct and amend, simply because it was within a system. So many factors was the system, where regulations, practices, the other parts also lack of, if you wish, cultural sensitivity. So we addressed those issues again with coaching, with a lot of questions, reflections, skills learning, feedback, and of course, making mistakes and recognizing the mistakes genuinely and apologizing for those mistakes, but showing that they were willing to learn. That's more or less how we really saw that in doing those actions, we were elevating the well-being of this Latino workforce. So like Shani said, all these factors, diversity, let them know that there's diverse people bringing a lot of perspective, a lot of strength, a lot of way of seeing things, right? And then the inclusion, let them belong, let them feel like they were member of the family. The equity, of course, providing with access to resources and so on. But all this thing we did it through coaching, with conversation, with self-reflections, learning, and education.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Miguel, for walking us through that very specific example. I think that was really interesting for all of us to hear. And I guess since you touched on the topic of community, I'd love to take a quick sidestep and ask Shani about this as well. Miguel mentioned, communities facing discrimination and how that could affect mental health. Is there a way for organizations to influence that as well?
Definitely. So I'll reference our organization. So we are in the media space right now. There are plenty of people from different businesses on this call, I'm sure. For me, DEI work has multiple pillars. One pillar of that is people. The other pillars include the business that we deliver, as well as how that business influences society in itself. And in doing that, how it influences community. The work that we do with our people, no matter where society is, for instance, I work with Malaysia, right? And in Malaysia, being an LGBTQ plus person had the additional set of struggles given the socio-political environment and the climate. An organization may not be able to completely influence the politics or the legal framework, but they can create a safe environment for the people within using their own people policies. The other parts of it include what kind of services and product does the organization provide out there for the world. In the media space, we get to influence what representation looks like, whether marketing is inclusive or not. And as a business, when we have a diverse group of people influencing the media that we put out there, we then get to do inclusive marketing campaigns. So in this ways, we influence communities through the people that we hire, the workplace that we create, and how that people and workplace influences the product that we put out there.
Thank you so much for sharing that connection. Very, very interesting. Before we move on, I also love to hear some thoughts from our audience again. I'd like to hear from all of you about your company or how your team or company celebrates diversity. So we're going to have some first answers, but for those of you who just joined, please go ahead and click the link that we'll put in the Zoom chat so you can join these polls and you can give some anonymous replies as well. So we see, so the question is simple but powerful. What is one way your company or team celebrates diversity? And this really, I hope that this poll will give us a glimpse into the various practices and initiatives that organizations are implementing to embrace that diversity and create that inclusive environment as well. So we're seeing food, we're seeing Pride Month celebrated, celebrating all different holidays, overall just their policies, honors all countries' holidays, okay. Celebration of different cultures and races, open conversations. Definitely Pride Month is it's a very recent one, so that makes a lot of sense. By being understanding and open about differences, okay. Yep, we got the Pride Month in. Policy on safe spaces, okay. Observe important holidays, especially religious related ones, okay. Organizing employee activities on key calendar events, right? That makes a lot of sense. Give affirmation, okay. Well-being leaves, interesting one, yeah. We have Pride Month, Women in Leadership in all our town halls, okay. Virtual celebration on specific theme. Added partners to insurance policy. That's an interesting one, definitely. Wow, these are great answers. Thank you so much. I love seeing how this is really celebrated in your company or in your team at this point in time. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Let's go back to our panelists. I have some more questions. In your role, Shani, you've likely encountered a lot of challenges as well when it comes to DEI, right? Can you provide us some examples of barriers you've seen?
There are so many barriers. What I want to highlight, maybe for me, what I think is the top three. We all want to do good and we all want to be good. The field of DEI isn't completely new. It's been around for 30 years. And even before that, we have all been inbuilt with a sense of fairness. But there's a reason workplaces aren't there yet. It's because DEI work is complex. The thing is, so I work across APAC. Every market is unique because every market comes with different histories, different legal and sociopolitical backgrounds. And in that, even in doing that, what is diversity, what are marginalized communities in one market might not be the same in another market. And then you add to that a workplace, the workplace culture also changes from market to market, even though you're part of the same organization. For instance, I'll give you the definition of what mental health is changes from one market to another market. UN includes, for people with disabilities, UN includes mental health as a disability. But in Singapore, we don't very often consider mental health as a disability. In Malaysia, we do think about mental health as a disability. So now when I introduce a program for disability, I might need to think about how that affects the people and how that will be understood by people differently in each of these markets. So that's one issue. The fact that there isn't one size fits all solution. And so for MNCs particularly, it's really hard to implement one solution in all of our markets globally. And that makes it really, really challenging. The second challenge to me is I loved looking at the answers just now that came in on how you celebrate diversity and inclusion. I think recently there is a trend of focusing a lot on unconscious bias training. It's a super trend. Starbucks shut down the entire office and said, hey, everybody's going to go for unconscious bias training today. I think a lot of times we understand people are one of the barriers towards becoming truly inclusive. And there is an over-focus for me on people sometimes. Yes, there is an importance in educating people. But I think there's a real importance in not just changing people, because if we focus too much on that, it makes us very defensive. And a lot of people run away from DEI conversations because it makes us really defensive. The alternative to that is to focus on systems. It is not just people who are biased. And in fact, correcting people can be particularly hard. Correcting systems has a much larger impact. I love that one person who mentioned the insurance policy in their organization was made to be equal towards partners as well as people who would be heteronormatively counted as married. That is a systemic change to me. And by influencing systems, it's the harder work to do, but it's the more important work to do. And I think the DEI field is shifting towards that. And to do that shift is particularly hard. The third big challenge for me is a lot of organizations currently and where they're at, and a lot of people leaders as well, see DEI work as a nice to have and not a need to do. But we are at the stage where it is a need to do if, as a business, we want to get the best talent and if we want to put the best product out there. Recently, we've been seeing a spate of letting goes, and a lot of people who are being let go or the budget cuts are around DEI and people space. And that to me is an absolute shame because we haven't completely understood the value of DEI yet. So with these three challenges, I can see lots of people in this space struggling.
Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it was really helpful how you walked through those three different areas to consider. And I know you said maybe not focusing on the individual that is the most important thing here, but I will focus on the individual for a second. I'd love to ask Miguel, as a coach, you're supporting individuals in navigating those barriers to DEI, right? So when Shani is working on the bigger systems, that's where you're coming in, working on the barriers on an individual level. Can you share some effective coaching techniques or some approaches that have helped individuals overcome these challenges? Essentially, what I'm asking is, how can DEI and inclusive coaching help leaders and even individuals overcome?
Yes. Actually, in addition to what Shani mentioned, which are very important, Shani, you really did it. You nailed it. I would like to add one more component and then link to how coaching can help very much in all these areas that Shani shared with us. That is the factor of change management. Because as Shani said, all these executives, managers, they already read books, they went to seminar, they really are taking e-learning courses, they already have the knowledge, it's very cognitive. But the problem is they do not, maybe they are not able to embody yet, it's not second nature yet, and that's when coaching comes in, right? And change management is essential here. And probably many of you guys know about ADKAR, ADKR, awareness, right? Desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, right? They are aware already, they read the books, but the desire, what is in there for them, that really takes time. That really requires reflection, requires going deep into what your values are, what your motivators are, and what your strengths are. How are those aligned with the company's value and with DEI policies? The company has a mission aligned with these DEI values, but if people do not internalize it and operationalize it every day, it's going to be very difficult to change. The system is part of the culture, and the culture is the result of the daily interactions that people in the company do. I use this analogy of the vapor. It's a water. When you boil the water, the molecules start moving around. They are, meeting each other, and the result of that is the vapor, which is the culture, as the result of the interaction of the molecules, which are each employee, each member of the company. Depending on the quality of this interaction, you create the culture. Inside of the culture are procedure, norm, regulations, and the system, right? If you don't address how people are interacting, which creates the culture, it's going to be very difficult to change. And then you need really the alliance and the commitment of leadership. That also requires coaching, a lot of work for reflection, learning, this desire to really set up goals in leadership, to internalize and make second nature in their action, their behavior, their inclusive language that they have to use every day, how to be aware of these microaggressions that by definition is in the subconscious. It's only when somebody let them know that that's a microaggression, they can reflect and learn from those mistakes. And that learning is a process. You have to practice every day, right? It's the muscle. You have to develop the muscle going to the gym. This mental muscle is daily practice. And then it's like, people call about plasticity in the neuroscience. Actually, that's the case. You have to rewire that part of the brain which served you in the past, which created all these problems against DEI. You have to change this part of the brain that creates this positive framework that creates inclusivity, diversity, acceptance, inclusion, belonging. But it's only you have rewired the brain. The rest is a dead letter. Right? You really have to do it. And coaching becomes very active, very functional, effective if you do this thing that I mentioned. Conversation, reflection, openness, holding, the executive or the employees with this self-space so that they can really share their inner deep feelings about their experiences related to the EI. And that again, vulnerability, you need a safe space for that. That's where coaching comes in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Miguel. And what a great analogy with the water. I think it's the first time I've heard that one. I'll definitely keep that saved for later. Thank you so much. Now, after hearing from both experts a little bit more, I'd like to also invite our audience again to share your thoughts. So the question now is, in your opinion, what is something you can do as an employee or a leader to improve DEI efforts at your workplace? And we have some first answers already coming in. I'm seeing influence policy making to be more inclusive. Yeah. Let everyone engage in everything and listen. Organize sharing on the topic to spread more awareness. These are great answers already. Let's see what else we have. If you're new to the webinar, please go ahead and click the link in the Zoom chat to join the polls. Share lived experience to influence through patterns. Interesting one. Request changes to be made. As a person with disability myself, advocate for disability inclusion. That's a great one. What other thoughts do you have on how you as an employee or a leader can improve the DEI efforts at your workplace? Real conversations by leaders sharing how they embrace diversity. Ask coworkers about their culture, religion, and other topics that are different from my own. That's a great start, definitely. Be an advocate and participate in the listening efforts. Create spaces for conversations. To have the courage to ask questions and have real conversations with different individuals. Employee resource groups. What else do we have? These are amazing answers already. Thank you so much. Okay, great to hear from our audience. Thank you so much for your thoughts as well. Now, let's move on to a couple more questions that we have. Shani, we've heard lots of great examples from the audience just now, as well as from Miguel and from yourself. Based on your experience, could you share how to measure the effectiveness of an organization's DEI efforts to ensure that what we're implementing and what we're trying to do actually has an ongoing progress and has an improvement?
I also noticed that's a really common question people ask, and it's a really important question. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done. I think the first step of that is figuring out what we are trying to achieve, because that defines what metrics we use. Personally, I think organizations need to set DEI targets for themselves, DEI goals for themselves. That goal could be in the form of representation. It could also be in the form of what inclusion means for them. And when you set these goals, then you find ways to track them. Some of these things will be really, really hard to track because, again, not everybody wants to tell you whether they have a disability because they might not feel as safe telling you. But we can still work towards asking that question in the long run. The fact that maybe only people mostly prefer not to say it right now. And then 2 years from now, they're more likely to give that answer. That in itself, that tracking in itself tells me how inclusive I am as an organization. So we have to measure representation, inclusion, and any other goals you have across the employee life cycle. We see how many women, for instance, if we notice that's a problem area for us, are exiting the organization. How many parents, new parents, are exiting the organization. And that is one measure that we track, depending on where we think there is a problem within our organization. The other best practice for me is having a comprehensive way of getting feedback from employees. So not just representation, but sort of like employee engagement data, exit data, regular tracking of engagement data, sense of belonging questionnaires, as well as informal feedback. So it's not just quantitative. There are real people, real stories, real experiences behind DEI. And giving people that platform to tell us anonymously is really important, because that gives us a bigger picture of whether the work that we're doing is landing or not. Linda, am I answering your question? It's a really, really broad question, but am I answering your question, sort of?
It is a really broad question, but thank you so much. You've definitely given us some good pointers on how an organization can kind of check back on what they're implementing, whether it's working out or not. And actually on that note, Miguel, I'd also love to hear from you on a more individual level. When you're coaching clients on DEI efforts, how do you measure their success and their improvement?
Yes, actually at the individual level, but also at the organizational level, I've done both. With high-ranking executives, we would coach on analyzing the metrics. Like Shani said, right? How many women, how many men, race, gender, you have these metrics in the company. Analyze those metrics and see what we can learn from those metrics. Where's the bias there, right? And if we identify the bias, they correct the action right away. It could be hiring, promoting, and so on, right? Retention, that is something that Shani also said. Why women are leaving the company. With retention and attraction, we will detect that right away. We will see the metrics too also, right? And then the surveys, the surveys like Shani said, different aspects, diversity, inclusion, how satisfied you are, you have a metric. But something interesting that I learned about this is don't impose those metrics on them. That's what I learned. Let them come up with their own metrics. And I found OKRs. The OKRs, very effective, because that allows them to come up with their own goals with different cadences. If this is high-ranking executives, every 3 months, strategic, monthly, operational could be weekly. So you have these metrics. As you know, OKR doesn't aim to 100%. The optimal level is 70%. If you really surpass 70%, then your goals were too easy. If this is below 70%, then your goals were too difficult, but you adjusted yourself based on your capabilities, your knowledge, your capacity, and so on. The idea is you take responsibility with all these metrics related to DEI. Recently, we've introduced, people metric analytics, we call it, right? People analytics. Then you have it there in all this network, who is interacting with whom, what type of communication, who is the port, who is the central node we are seeing, who, and that gives you the metric about race, gender, and so on. People analytics could help you very much to detect where is the bias, where is the tendency, where is the trend, how many people are leaving, how many people are coming, how many people are you are retaining in the pipe, and so on, right? So we have those type of things, but we also, with people in the coaching, of course, in addition to all the things, about, microaggression, unconscious bias, those are very important in order to assess how we are evolving and being more inclusive. But we also suggest in coaching to form alliances with part of the ecosystem in the business, suppliers and users. Make sure that the suppliers are diverse too. That's a metric too that we pay attention to. That would really exemplify how DEI-oriented company you are, right? So then we form alliance with the government to see if we are active promoting DEI in different areas of the ecosystem. So it's not only the company itself, it's not only the members, the employees, it's the organization working together with the other institutions in the ecosystem. The neighborhood, we also include the neighborhood to really measure, how much we are progressing on DEI. What are we doing for the neighborhood? Are we serving different neighborhoods, right? Different race type of neighborhoods, status, education, economic status, and so on. So we also see those numbers to measure how much or how well we are progressing on this path of DI development.
Thank you so much for these great insights. It's been really, really helpful hearing this. And to be honest, Miguel and Shani, I got to say, I could talk about this topic forever. I probably have 10 more questions lined up for you, but I'm also keeping one eye on the chat, on the Q&A, and I'm seeing lots of questions coming in. So if you don't mind, I would love to cut this a bit shorter and instead give our audience a little bit more screen time here. Not necessarily screen time itself, but I'd love to kind of put the audience in the spotlight. Feel free to go ahead and put your burning questions into the Q&A, and we'll read them out and we'll go through them one by one, because I think I've seen some really great questions here. So let me jump right in. I'll give everybody about 10 to 20 more seconds. If you want to jot down any kind of questions, feel free to do so now. And in the meantime, I'll pick out a couple ones. I see a few have already been answered. Let's see what else we've got. I think here's a great question. Maybe I'll hand this over to Shani. How do you get stakeholders who may not see its value yet to onboard with your DEI initiatives? I think it's a great question.
It's, again, Linda, you give me so many complex questions. I'm going to try and give a generic answer. First, I would love to know the reason, the barrier for that particular stakeholder. And I think that's on us to go figure out what is it that's holding them, because knowing what's holding them back gives us a different way of approaching it. Some generic ways in which I have worked with people who have a difficulty, if the issue is around understanding the reason for investing, then we try and explain that to them. If the issue is around a constraint, budget constraint, then we explore solutions that are more affordable to them. If the issue is around disbelief, sometimes we need to show them proof of life. Get them to invest in something small first, show the success of that, and then get them to scale that into bigger DEI initiatives. Often, some people might not be ready to hear anything about DEI as a stakeholder, in which case, I describe the best way to do DEI work as, think about it as you watch a concert, right? And you start a standing ovation. It takes one courageous person to stand up and clap first. And a lot of times when you're in that moment, somebody else will stand up and clap with them. So this is how we get stakeholders involved. We find the one strong, loud advocate, get them to stand up and talk for us. And then get a charismatic advocate to be the one talking. So that will get a bunch of people together to stand up. As you stand, you get people buying into that momentum. More people stand up and join the standing ovation. There will always be some people who will not stand up. And it's okay that not all of our stakeholders stand with us. Most of them will eventually have to stand because they can't see the stage anymore. So they stand because it becomes not normal, not comfortable to avoid DEI. And that's how I think we engage. I find it useful to engage stakeholders who might be a bit hesitant initially.
What a great example. Thank you so much for kind of linking that to a standing ovation. I think it's a very visual way of describing it. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. We have, oh, Miguel, this is a great question. I'd love to ask you, as a person with disability myself, how to deal with HR or DEI senior leaders who cannot take constructive criticism from me on the gaps of in DEI practices and culture, especially in the area of disability.
Wow, what a wonderful question. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we assess in coaching is accessibility. That's a key metric. So if I would be coaching executive, and that would be one metric, obviously that metric would be very low. Then I would ask a question to that executive: why is this this metric low? Why do you think that's low? Is that acceptable? Is that according to your company's DEI policy? Let them reflect. Why is that metric low? He's going to come with many rational things. I know, budget, everybody's treated this. We know that, right? But you are championing DEI at your company. And this compared with the other industries or similar companies are very low. So what do you think your clients, your suppliers, the ecosystem again, is going to think about your company when they see this low metric? And they will now reflect. If this is not by this empathy related factor, now at least economically, he will start thinking now. Ideally, he should be touched as soon as he sees that the number is low by empathy. But unfortunately, sometimes it's really difficult to touch the heart of executives because they are much number-oriented people, right? Money, cash flows, budgets, and so on, right? So we will let them know start this way, and then probably suggest him to spend some time with people with disability and see from that perspective what is the barriers, the obstacles for them to perform at the ideal level. And probably we suggest if this is physical, on-site coaching, probably we'll go, why don't we go together and just observe? Where are the difficulties? Where is the lack of accessibility, right? Number three, if that doesn't work yet, probably I will ask them to education, right? There's a lot of training about accessibility, how to make it feasible and so on. There's a lot of courses on that, right? And finally, I probably will say, look at, especially with Japanese companies here, I will say, look, let's go to the Tokyo Chamber of Commerce and see how the other companies similar to you are doing. Let's go together. What can we learn from here? How the other companies are doing? And in many cases, they don't know. The other companies have already set up some measures to help people with disability. So the whole thing boils down to consciousness and awareness.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I really like how you outlined this, let's do it together, right? In a very practical sense. I think that makes it much more approachable for people. And I really appreciate the pointers you made here. Thank you so much. We have so many great questions. I'm having a hard time choosing. But Shani, I was thinking, could you answer a tricky one for us that I think comes up a lot of times when we talk about equity? One person is saying these days, oops, now I lost it. These days, a lot of organizations have DEI targets. In order to meet the targets, it is that sometimes capable candidates not falling under DEI get missed out. I mean, just to meet the targets, non-capable candidates can get hired. Just asking out of curiosity, this was a point of discussion of a client.
Linda, this is such a good question that I was answering it. I was putting a typed out answer anyways, because I felt like we couldn't leave this session without answering that. I'll expand a little bit on the answer that I've thrown out there. This is a very real worry. In fact, when we use the term in itself, that's a diverse candidate. We're looking for diverse candidates. We're going to promote diverse persons. We are already adding to the problem. We are creating a culture where when someone gets hired, the automatic thought in their own head and in other people's head is that they've gotten hired because they are a diverse candidate. But that's not why they got hired. That shouldn't be why they got hired. What we should be still always hiring for is competent people. But what DEI science has shown us is that currently our ways of working, our frames of working have not been completely accessible to all different types of people. And that's where the problem is. The problem hasn't been the person per se, but the systems and the biases that people hold that has stopped an otherwise competent person from gaining the same level, the same equity as everybody else. So what we need to do and focus our work around is removing those barriers and trusting that our processes remove those barriers, and the people who we might often think of as incompetent, we might be thinking of as incompetent because we have a biased way of thinking about competence must only look a certain way. So this is where I explain DEI targets are important, and I use the word targets instead of quotas, because quota is where we say die. This is Singaporean lingo. Die. No matter what happens, we have to hire a minority candidate. I must have 40% women hired at a certain point. And if I set that as a quota, very often I end up just pushing people to fill that quota. I reframe that language and use the language of DEI targets. A target means it's okay if I don't hit it, as long as I can justify why I don't hit it. And very often, DEI targets are set in the long term. It's not useful to say, currently my organization has 30% women. I want to get to 50% women in a year. Because then I ended up doing things that just forces people into that role. DEI work takes long. And we set a target that's realistic. We're pushing people towards hitting that target in ways that changes the system, not just forcing people to fit into that system.
Thank you so much for covering that question, Shani. And I know you already answered it in text message, but I really wanted to give you that space here as well, because I think it's a very, very important question to cover in this context of equity, especially. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. I have one more question. I'd love to ask you, Miguel, to answer this, because you just talked about, okay, if I'm an employee and I want to discuss this with, my manager, my HR leader, whoever it is, but what if it's the other way around? One person is asking, one of my team members has not opened up about the support needed. How can I approach them and ask them for support?
Wow, that's also a very good question. In coaching, we practice several types of skills to make it effective communication. One of the skills I would suggest is using NVC, nonviolent communication. NVC, as if people do not know nonviolent communication, basically what it says, when you communicate with somebody, especially when you ask for something, you first have to go deep into yourself. You have to be, if you wish, self-intimate. Know what all your parts inside really need. So we talk from the needs, not from positions. Normally, human beings, based on the neuroscience, we talk, interact from the cerebral part, which is very logical, cognitive, and we forgot actually our true needs. Most of the time we are asking from the cerebral, and that is what people call the mimetic desire. Mimetic desire, by definition, is we want what other people want. It's not your true needs. And then we get into arguments, into fights, because we are talking, asking from position, not from needs. How do you know your needs? You have to really know your values. what is important for you. Then once you understand that, then you interact, you engage in a conversation with that boss or manager, expressing your true needs and inviting open, inclusive language. So you express your needs in a way that the other person feels receptive. This is one way how to really get in conversation when you really want to ask for something, which is your true values. And you will be happy only when your values are met. Otherwise, you are just talking positions, money, position, promotion. Those are things external who most of the time causes people to go into fighting. But if you talk from your true needs, really needs, which means my need is to growth, my need is to evolve, my need is to be compassionate, empathic with my colleagues. Those needs actually invite other people to help you, but you have to convey it in a way, again, that's inclusive, that is needs-based, which most of the time are also needs that the other party has, and that's why they resonate when you talk from your true needs. That would be one suggestion.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I know you probably have 10 more lined up, but I do need to bring this amazing panel discussion slowly to an end. We've been talking about fostering inclusivity in the workplace, and we hope that we've been able to address some, definitely not all, but a lot of your questions and provided some valuable insight into this important topic. Now, before we wrap up, I'd just love to give Shini and Miguel an opportunity to share any last words or some final thoughts if you'd like to. Shini, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. I want to say I really love the questions that are coming through because it is saying how real people's struggles are in understanding and working with the challenges around DEI. And what the only thing I think I can be left saying is it's going to take forever to solve a lot of these issues. DEI is a slow game, and there are lots of interested people here, and the science of it is growing, meaning there is more and more resources out there. Each and every organization, each and every person is at a different stage of their DEI journey. Find people who are at similar stages as you, connect with them in this space, and work with them, bounce ideas off each other. And it can get really tiring. It can burn you out in this process to always hit a wall. So when you have that support network, it helps. And together, we work on our challenges and we learn from each other. And that's the one piece of advice I have always benefited from doing this space, and a piece of advice I want to leave with the audience here because I don't have all of the answers.
Thank you so much for this great advice. Miguel, would you have any final words that you'd like to share?
Oh, yes, please. Adding to what Shani nicely put it, we are in a new era. I think this is an era when we finally are recognizing each other for what we are, truly are, actually. It's our humaneness, our essence, which is the same, I believe, regardless of our race, our gender, we are the same. And we are coming to that realization. DEI seems to me as a natural consequence of that tendency. Whether we want it or not, it had to happen. It has started now. It's up to us right now to cultivate it. And how do we cultivate it? Conversations, open-minded, inclusiveness, providing this support. Now, practically, how do you do that? Well, in the company, you can have circles, you can create now spaces. I think ERG, I guess you call it, employee resources groups could help. You know, many companies are creating that, promoting this free conversation without any fear, you know, where people can manifest, share their experiences openly without the fear of retribution, right? So I guess these spaces could create and let us advance faster in this integration that we human beings, I think, are aiming at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I really appreciate that. And thank you all in the audience for your participation and engagement. We've heard a couple of things, a lot of great things. We've heard that creating inclusive workplaces is an ongoing journey and it requires really that collective effort. So let's continue to challenge those norms and embrace diversity and try to champion inclusivity in our own organizations or in our communities. Now, I have an exciting announcement for you all before we finish this panel discussion. We have a special offer for our audience today. Our hashtag Can You Hear Me ebook is available for free to download. It's packed with useful insights, including strategies to create more inclusive workplaces, and it will complement the knowledge we've shared today in our webinar quite well. So be sure to grab your copy as well. A couple of last items before we sign off. The recording of this webinar will be made available on our website, so you can revisit any parts you might have missed or share it with your colleagues or friends. Also, a post-webinar survey will pop up any second now, and we would love to hear your thoughts on this panel discussion today. And lastly, please mark your calendars for our huge upcoming event, the Mental Health Festival. We'll be diving into various topics related to mental health, and we'll be providing some valuable insights and practical strategies as well. We hope to see you there in September. Now, before we end, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our incredible panelists, Shini and Miguel. Your expertise and your insights and your passion have really enriched our discussion today. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your time and your willingness to also share your perspectives and just help us foster that inclusivity where we can. So thank you both for being here today. And of course, a big thank you to our amazing audience as well. We appreciate your active participation, your thoughtful questions, your contributions throughout this panel discussion. And it is your engagement that really has made these conversations meaningful and impactful. So thank you so much. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. Let's continue our journey towards inclusive workplaces and a better future for all. So with that, take care, stay well, and see you again soon.